In 2010, a woman known only as Patient SM stood inches from a live snake, let a stranger press a knife to her throat during a mock robbery, and walked through a haunted house without flinching once. And neuroscientists still cannot explain how, years later, with that fear center completely destroyed, her choices are still being steered by something that looks exactly like fear. SM lived in Iowa. She had a rare genetic disorder called Urbach-Wyeth disease, and by her 20s, it had calcified and destroyed both of her amygdalae, the two almond-shaped clusters deep in the temporal lobes that neuroscience had spent decades calling the brain's fear center. Researchers Justin Feinstein and Antonio Damasio brought her into the lab at the University of Iowa and started testing the boundaries of what was left. They showed her spiders. They took her to an exotic pet store and put a corn snake in her hands. They screened her the most frightening horror films available. Nothing happened, not a flicker. The first anomaly was almost too clean. In over 20 years of documented life events, armed robbery, domestic violence, near-death experiences, SM reported no memory of ever feeling afraid. Her heart rate barely moved during threat simulations that made trained researchers flinch. Damage confirmed by MRI, behavior confirmed by observation, the two matched perfectly. For a while it looked like the cleanest case study in the history of effective neuroscience. The obvious theory wrote itself. The amygdala generates fear. Remove it and fear disappears. Textbooks had said this for decades, built on decades of animal lesion studies. SM seemed to be the missing human proof, a person whose entire fear circuitry had been surgically erased by disease, and who behaved exactly as the model predicted. Case closed, the researchers thought. A tragic but tidy confirmation of 80 years of neuroscience. Then in 2013, the same team gave her a single breath of carbon dioxide-enriched air, a standard lab technique for triggering the sensation of suffocation. Within seconds, SM was clawing at her chest, gasping, begging researchers to help her, convinced she was dying. She had a full-blown panic attack. It was the first fear response ever recorded in her in a body whose fear center had been gone for years. The theory that had explained her for over a decade collapsed inside a single breath. Here is the detail that still unravels neuroscientists. 2 other amygdala-damaged patients were given the same air. Both panicked identically. If the amygdala truly generated fear, this should have been physiologically impossible. There was no tissue left to generate it. But the panic wasn't just present. It was disproportionate, more intense than in people with fully intact amygdalae breathing the same air, as though something downstream had lost its brakes rather than its trigger. Whatever was producing that terror wasn't the almond-shaped structure at all. It was something else, something that had been running underneath it the entire time, and it had apparently been waiting. Researchers scrambled for an explanation. One theory pointed to the brainstem, where ancient chemoreceptors monitor blood gas levels and can trigger suffocation alarms with no cortical input at all. Another pointed to the insula, which tracks internal bodily states and might generate dread from the inside out, independent of external threat. A third suggested the amygdala was never a single fear generator, but one node in a distributed network, and cutting it out simply exposed a parallel system nobody had mapped. Each theory explained a piece. None explained why her external fear vanished completely while her internal fear returned amplified, or why a woman incapable of choosing to flee a snake would still gasp and beg for help over carbon dioxide she couldn't even see. That asymmetry is the part still sitting unresolved in the literature. Something in SM's brain was still computing threat, still overriding her conscious behavior, still making decisions on her behalf, just not through the region neuroscience had spent a century pointing to. The amygdala theory wasn't wrong, exactly. It was incomplete in a way nobody had detected, because nobody had ever met a person missing the part they thought was doing all the work. If a structure that decades of research called the seat of fear can be gone entirely, and fear can still come roaring back through a channel no one has located, then somewhere in your own skull, right now, a circuit you've never heard named might be the one actually making your choices for you.